you're going to have to feed us. Chapter 5, in which Jared and Simon wake Sleeping Beauty. Jared barely noticed the path they took to the treasure room. He shut his eyes against the burn of tears. Here we are, said the dwarf who had brought them. His beard was white, and there was a ring of keys at his hip. He turned to the group carrying the glass box that held Mallory. Just set that down right there. The treasure chamber was lit with a single lantern, but the heaps of shining gold reflected the light, so it was not as dim as it might have been. A silver peacock with a lapis and coral-studded tail pecked at a copper mouse sitting atop a vase in a way that suggested more boredom than malice. The white-bearded dwarf peered at them while the others trooped out. He grinned at them fondly. I'll just see if I can find something for you boys to play with. Perhaps gobstones? They even stand up and hurl themselves. I'm hungry, Simon said. We're not mechanical. If you're going to keep us here, you're going to have to feed us. The dwarf squinted. True enough. I'll bring you a mash of spiders and turnips. That'll fix you right up. How are you going to give it to us? Jared asked suddenly. There's no door. Oh, there's a door all right, said the dwarf. I made that cage myself. Sturdy, isn't it? Yeah, said Jared. Real sturdy. He rolled his eyes. Wasn't it bad enough that they had gotten tricked and were stuck in a cage? Did the dwarf really have to rub it in? See, the lock is inside this bar. The dwarf tapped one of the bars lightly with his finger. I had to make the gears really tiny. Had to work with a hammer the size of a pin. If you look, you can see the seam of the door. See? Right there. Can you open it? Simon asked. Jared looked at him with surprise. Had Simon been planning the whole time, while Jared had been busy just being upset? You want to see it in action? Asked the dwarf. Yeah, Jared said, not quite believing that they were going to get this lucky. Well, okay, boys. Now step back for a moment. There. Just once, and then I better get you food. What a treat to finally get to use all these things. Jared smiled encouragingly. The dwarf took the key ring from his belt and selected a tiny key. It was the size and shape of a whistle with a complicated pattern of ridges on it. He inserted it into one of the bars, although Jared couldn't see the hole from their side of the cage. With a twist of the dwarf's wrist, clicks, clunks, whirs, and whizzing noises came from the whole rail. There! The dwarf pulled on the bar, and the front section of the cage swung open on hidden hinges. But just as the boys were moving forward, the dwarf quickly shut it. Wouldn't it have been as much fun if you hadn't at least tried to escape, he chuckled, moving to hook the key ring back on his belt. Jared darted his hand out and grabbed for the key ring at the same time. The keys clattered to the floor. Simon scooped them up before the dwarf could. Hey, no fair, said the dwarf. Give those back. Simon shook his head. But you have to. You're prisoners. You can't have the keys. We're not giving them back, Jared said. The dwarf looked panicked. He walked to the edge of the hall and yelled, Quick, someone! Send guards! The prisoners are escaping! When no one came, he fixed Jared and Simon with a glare. You better stay right there, he said, and darted out into the hall, still calling for guards. Simon fitted the key into the door, and they jumped out of the cage. Hurry, they're coming! We have to get Mallory! Jared gestured to her case. There's no time, said Simon. We'll come back. Wait, Jared said. Let's hide here. They'll think we ran away. Simon looked panicked. Where? On top of the cage. Jared pointed to the solid silver lid of the cage. He scrambled on top of a nearby pile of loot and used it to climb up. Come on! Simon climbed halfway, and Jared hauled him onto the top. They had just enough time to curl up tightly before dwarfs burst into the room. They're not here either, one dwarf said. Not in the hallway, not in any of the nearby rooms. Jared smirked against the cool metal. Why not the dogs? They'll find them. Dogs? Simon mounted Jared as the dwarf shoveled out of the room. What's the matter? Jared smiled. giddy at the success of their plan. You love dogs. Simon rolled his eyes and dropped to the floor, kicking a candelabrum and scattering a few pieces of hematite. He picked up one and tucked it in his pocket. They're not here either. Stop making so much noise, Jared said, trying to climb down carefully and nearly toppling a copper rosebush. They knelt beside the glass case and Jared unlatched it. There was a hiss as the lid lifted as though some invisible gas was escaping. Inside, Mallory was motionless. "Mallory," Jared said, "get up." He pulled at her arm, but it was limp and flopped back onto her chest when he let go. "You don't think someone needs to kiss her, do you?" Simon asked, "like Snow White?" "That's gross." Jared couldn't remember anything about kissing in the field guide, but he couldn't remember anything about glass coffins either. He leaned in and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. There was no response. "We have to do something," Simon said. "We don't have much time." Jared grabbed a lock of Mallory's hair and tugged hard. She twitched slightly and half opened her eyes. Jared sighed with relief. "Get off me," she muttered and tried to turn on her side. "Help me get her up," Jared said, moving the sword off her and onto the floor. He pulled her body a little ways up before she slipped back into the case. "Come on, Mel," Jared said into her ear. "Up!" Simon slapped her cheek. She twitched again, opening her eyes groggily. "What?" she managed. "You have to get out of there," said Simon. "Stand up." Lean on the sword like a cane, Jared suggested. With her brother's help, Mallory managed to get on her feet and stagger out into the hallway. It was empty. Lean on the sword like a cane. For once, Simon said, things are actually going our way. Just then, they heard the distant sound of hollow metallic barking.